Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the GameChangers United podcast. I'm super excited to have Kevin Palmieri on the show, the CFO and co-founder and host of The Next Level. It's a university and a podcast, right, Kevin? You can enlighten us on that. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat. We had a wonderful conversation behind the scenes, so I'm sure things will go well in front of the scenes. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, and you're very welcome. So, I'm really excited about today. Before we deep dive into your fascinating story and the things that you're doing today, can you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience?
Yes. So I am Kevin Palmieri. I am the CFO, co-founder, and host of Next Level University. I am also a podcast coach, consultant, and trainer, as well as a speaker. We do a lot of different things. But at this point, the podcast is really our main thing. We do 7 episodes a week. We just crossed our 1120th episode. We have listeners in 125 plus countries. That really is it's our baby. We love our podcast and we have the best community in the world. I really believe that.
So everyone who's listening now or watching this on YouTube understands that I was a little bit nervous when going on this interview.
No need.
You have so much experience, and I wanna talk to you about like using a podcast as a channel. But before we do that, we in the Game Changers United podcast, we deep dive on the story first. So the personal story and the entrepreneurial story. So what how did you end up doing this? So there are a lot of questions that I'm going to just answer to you. But before I do that, for who is this podcast going to be very relevant, Kevin?
This is going to be for somebody who wants more out of life, but doesn't necessarily know what that means. And they think it means going and searching for external when it really means reflecting on internal. Mm-hmm. That really is what I talk about and what our brand is. There's a lot of places you can learn how to sell, quote unquote. Yeah. But what if you have a money block? What if you have limiting beliefs? What if you have scarcity mindset? Like, there's a lot of things that have to get done before you can actually bring things into the external world. So this is for anybody who wants to get better, has tried a lot of things, but has not tried self-reflection yet.
Ooh.
Boom.
That's a tricky one. This is like, and you're being tested right now when you're listening. It's like, it's like self-reflection on your self-reflection, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Did I do that? Yes or no? So what I always say is moving forwards by moving inwards first. Mm. And I think that is the theme that we're going to talk about today. And yeah, as with all the businesses with a story, I mean, you came to this point because you, in one point in your life, had to move inwards first to be able to move forward again, right?
Yes.
So can you take us back, a few years ago, I think it is, right?
Yeah,
so,
it was...
actually. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. At this point, I think it's, 5 years, 6 years?
5 or 6 years ago. And how old were you then?
I was 25 when this whole journey, quote unquote, of self-improvement, self-enlightenment, personal development really started. Yeah.
So because on your website, I could read, like, I was sitting on the bed and having these thoughts.
Yep.
So can you take us with you in that room, in that moment, in those thoughts?
Yeah. So contextually, I want to make sure that I give the lead up. So I was 25 years old, and from all outside standards, I was living the life of anybody's dreams. My girlfriend was a model. I had a sports car. I had a high-paying job. I had the body of my dreams because I had just done a bodybuilding show, new apartment. Everything seemed amazing from the outside looking in, but I had never done an internal look at myself. So I wasn't very happy. I wasn't very fulfilled. I didn't feel very successful. I was very insecure. I lacked confidence. And one day my girlfriend came to me and said, "Hey, I'm going to leave you because this relationship isn't really serving me anymore." And when she left, that's when I started at least looking internally. Now, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what any of it meant, but I knew that there had to be something deeper. Now, here's the problem.
Sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say, here's the problem. I stopped looking inward, and then I convinced myself that if I went and made a bunch of money, like way more money, more of my problems would go away.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That, and I think a lot of us have fallen guilty of that. So the next year, I ended up getting a promotion at my job. I was working in the weatherization industry. All that means is we would go into buildings and make them more energy efficient. That was my job in a nutshell. Since I worked for the state, most of our jobs were on state buildings. I got anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour, which is awesome. I'm all in on that. And I decided that I was going to make the most money this year I'd ever made. So that was perfect. I'm a foreman now, which means I'm on the job from the very beginning to the very end. I can make more money. So that year I was on the road for 10 months out of the 12 months because most of our work was on the road. And while it was fun because I was making a lot of money, it was a lot of work and it was tiring and it was exhausting and it was not good for me mentally or physically. But we got to the end of the year. I opened up my final pay stub and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. And I had another one of these opportunities for a deeper look at myself because I realized I'm not happy though. I'm still not happy. I thought this paycheck would make me happy.
Yeah. So, and I'm really curious, because we are starting now the conversation at 25 when you experienced that. Can you tell us a little bit, like, what happened before? Like, you grew up in Massachusetts, in the States. Like what was the context of your childhood?
Yeah, right? I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't meet my father until I was 27. So at this point in my story, I still hadn't met my dad. I didn't know who my dad was. We were definitely lower middle class. We didn't have a lot of money. But the interesting thing about me, I think I always knew I wanted to live life differently. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. And I think that's such an important piece and through line of who I am. But all things considered, my childhood was pretty normal. I mean, I played sports. I was really good at sports. I had some very good friends that lived close to me. We would go play in the woods. We would ride our bikes. We would go down to the baseball field. So yeah, for me, I think not having a dad in the picture, that was the biggest trauma point. And that really became a chip on my shoulder that made me say, look, I really want to be successful. I really want to prove everybody wrong that didn't believe me.
Was it that you were trying to replace the thing that you had in your head that the role of a father would look like to be successful? Do you think that was unconsciously something that you were trying to substitute?
I think it was part of it. I think the other part of it for me was I think I always connected. If I had a lot of money, I would have a lot of choices.
Okay. If I have a lot of money, I have a lot of choices. That was a belief, and we will talk about it later. That turned out to be a limiting belief. In that time, you thought it was a fueling belief, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I assumed that if I had money, everything would be easy. That was my belief. Because everything's hard when you don't have money. So everything must be easy if you do have money. That was my deep, deep, deep belief for sure, especially in my childhood.
Yeah, and I really like thinking about it now, and just for the listeners, like we have a short conversation up front, and I had some information that I received from you, but these conversations are also very how do you say that? Like I don't know what you're going to say in depth, right? Yeah. So the thing that keeps coming back to my mind is like you took on a responsibility that wasn't yours, and you tried to fill in a position that you maybe energetically or I think unconsciously saw that there was a void, right? I mean, the father that had to make the money to be able to be successful. Yeah.
I also don't think I think I was under the impression for most of my life that my job to create a brighter future self. It was never just going to happen for me. I think I understood that at a fairly deep level. The only way my future is really going to be brighter is if I create the brightness.
If you create the brightness, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're losing a little bit connection, Kevin. Now, in this important, I think now it's back. Yeah. So can you maybe repeat it just to be sure that we have it?
Yeah. I realized at a deep level fairly early in my life that if my future was going to be bright, it was my job to create that. It wasn't just going to happen by accident. It wasn't going to happen by luck. And it wasn't just going to happen circumstantially. I had to go do something if my future was going to be as bright as I hoped it was going to be.
But do you also feel like now with the wisdom and information now looking back that it was also partly a responsibility that wasn't yours?
I don't know. I can see how it could be that. And I mean, let's think of it this way, right? Say I went in a completely different path and I was very miserable right now. Yeah. Maybe I would look back and say, well, it was never my responsibility. The fact that I'm actually happy and fulfilled and aligned, I'm actually glad everything happened the way it did.
Exactly.
So, you know,
yeah, that's
it depends.
Yeah, it depends. Definitely. Interesting. Okay. So, being raised by two women, and you just got married. We were talking about that. Yes. So another woman in your life. How did that impacted you as a man?
Yeah. Again, it's one of those, and you and I are obviously going to go deep, and we're already starting to go deep. It's very hard to understand how it impacted me as a man because I don't know what I would be like if I wasn't raised by two women. So I don't necessarily know the contrast. But what I will say is I think it helped me be more vulnerable because I didn't have anybody, and I'm not saying this is the way it would have gone, but I didn't really have anybody saying, you know, rub dirt on it and don't cry. I was really never given that feedback or that advice. That's one part of it. The respect I have for women is just something that I don't know that I would have if I wasn't raised by women. That's a very interesting, important piece for me to understand. I know that I had a temper when I was younger, for sure. And I realized very quickly that having a temper around a man can be very different than having a temper around a woman. Mm-hmm. You know, a woman might be scared if you have a temper where a man might not. They might take on the ego as well. That's definitely something. It's interesting because even today, I woke up and I had a very stressful morning because there was stuff going on, and my wife came in and she was talking to me, and I was very short with her. I was very, I won't say mean, but I was very like, I got to get this done. I can't do this right now. And I went and apologized after, and I said, I'm so sorry. My state was off and I should have communicated that better. But I think for me, it's helped me with self-awareness. Mm-hmm. It's helped me own the fact that I want to make sure everybody in my life feels really, really safe. That's important to me. That's very important to me. Now, this is the other thing I'll say. Our listeners are women. That doesn't usually land for people, like as a tattooed bodybuilder.
Exactly. I was just thinking that. That's funny because Alan, your co-host, is also a big guy, right?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Okay.
But I think that's why. I think one of the reasons why is Alan and I are both, Alan was raised by women too. He was raised by his mom and his sister. So I think that when we connected, and I don't mean this with ego, but I think women saw what we were doing and said, wow, men like that do exist. Men that are confident, masculine, but also vulnerable. Yeah. And they listen and they're supportive and they talk about their feelings. Wow, what a unique thing. I think that's the unique perspective and brand that we have. But I think it's based on the fact that both of us were raised by women. So there wasn't a lot of the toxic masculinity that other people might have had to unlearn. I don't think I ever really had to unlearn that. It never felt good to me.
No. So you should actually start it like a dating show or something.
I don't know where I'll find the time, but maybe in the future.
I think there are many women that are like, yeah, that's the kind of man I want. This is like the next level level man.
Yeah, without ego. Ego. I think that's the important piece is there's a lot of ego out there. There's a lot of people that can teach you how to make more money, but do you actually like them?
Yeah, this is actually, I was talking to one of my coaches today, and we were talking about sales conversations, and I have a few. So I work for the one-to-one is only 6 or 7 people a year because I just want to be very close and very intimate and very like guiding you all the way through the whole process of building a social business. And we were actually talking about like, sales can also be something very safe, something very it is literally you help someone to make the right decision for them in that moment, whether it's a yes or a no. And if you detach yourself from the outcome, then you are really genuinely taking care of other people.
Yeah.
Instead of just forcing people to buy stuff. And I did it too. I bought stuff like years ago when I was in the beginning of my journey as well. Then I think back now and I'm like, oh my God, it makes me nauseous already. Almost like how people do that, how they force, how they highlight your pain in a way that you are like, wow, I'm never going to get out of it if I don't buy this product, right?
Yeah, it's heavy. There's a lot of, I never wanted to be in sales. Like I never wanted to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. That was never my focus in the very beginning of this. I didn't know all this was going to happen the way it has. But one of the things that I try really hard to do is I will literally tell somebody, honestly, I don't think you're a good fit for this.
Exactly. Yeah.
I literally do not want you to give me your money unless it's a win-win. And if you're giving me your money and it's not a win on your end, it's a win-lose. And that's not what I want. That's not the way to build a real authentic business or a community. It has to be about the community first. And I think some of us, not all of us, but some of us have lost sight of the fact the goal of a business is not to make money. It's to make change. And when you make change, you are compensated financially for that change. But that comes secondary. That is not the first point of starting a business. It doesn't work that way.
No. And I'm really curious, like what the difference would be in the US culture compared to the European culture, for example, in that. So to be honest, I was never in the States, so I don't have a very good reference of that, other than that I speak to a lot of game changers from the US. So I feel like it's also depending on the culture where you are, whether it's more a salesy approach or not. I know it's a little bit off topic, but I'm just curious, like how do you experience that in the US compared as well to?
It's hard to say because so many of my interactions are online. Yeah. So really, I think it's very global at this point.
Yeah.
But I just think that a lot of it's like an exchange. It's like, or it's very much, I'm just going to send you a message and I want you to work with me versus actually adding value. So I don't know if that's because of geography or if it's just the way that the landscape of online sales has gone, where it's almost like, hey, you're a person and maybe you could benefit from what I have. Let's jump on a call to talk about it. Or it's just a cold message. So I would speak more to the social media aspect of it than the geography, because that's what I could speak to more. I don't see a lot of people in person. Really, everything I see is like this. I'm always sitting here talking to people. So that's what I would say.
Boxed in your way.
I am. I'm here all day, right here in front of this thing.
Wow. Yeah. 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 It's very interesting. So we're going from one side to the other. So I hope people can follow us, but I think they can.
Yeah, I do too.
The thing that pops into my mind right now is like the thing that you're saying. Yeah. So you need to be in business to change the game. I mean, well, we are on the Game Changers podcast. Do you also believe or feel or know that you can only say that when you are confident about who you are and what you do?
I'd like to think that's the way it is, but I've met many people behind the scenes who aren't. I mean, they say that because it sounds sexy.
Okay.
Right? It's almost like a company that says, yeah, we're sustainable and we're recycling and everything is the way it should be. But behind the scenes, they're, doing stuff that they're not saying in front of the scenes. No, I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who know that's a sexy message and it will attract people, but their core values are not actually in alignment with what they're putting out there. Unfortunately, honestly, one of the hardest parts of growing the podcast and meeting so many people is I have been let down a lot. I have met people that I was like, wow, this person's really awesome. And the closer you get to somebody, the closer you get to the truth. Unfortunately.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. This is, I can relate to that so much.
Yeah.
And even like big names in the industry, that you think like, oh my God, they have all the ducks in the row, and then the reality is different.
Yeah.
So before we get to the core values, because I'm really curious, how did you? So I've been on a discovery journey myself as well. So the last 2.5 years, I think. Yeah. And it started when my sister passed away in November 2017, and she was a multi-disabled girl. And her presence made a huge impact in my life. I was 11 when she was born. And not until like a few days after her funeral, I felt like also relief. And I started to investigate that, and went on this roller coaster without safety belt journey that you experience yourself as well. Literally didn't know where to start, what to do, and just did it. And along the way, I discovered more layers of myself and unlayered things, let go of things. And that's where I start finding like these core values along the way, right? The first one, and then the second one. And for me, that was so fascinating that self-improvement was something that I could do myself.
Yeah.
And it sounds a little bit weird maybe, but that gave me a lot of confidence, because I was never told that I could do it myself, for example. So when you relate that back to your story, when you were 25, you were hitting that unfulfilled feeling of, okay, this is not what I want anymore. How did you start your journey of discovering, unraveling, and identifying your core values and the things that you want?
Yeah. So that leads to exactly where we were in the story. When I opened that final pay stub of the year, I made $100,000. Something inside me shifted, and I said, look, I don't want to do this anymore, because this outcome is just money. It's not fulfillment. And I realized that in that moment, for most of my life, and especially that year, I had lived unconsciously, just going through the motions. I said, what's the opposite of unconscious? Hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. That's when it all shifted for me, because when I was thinking of questions to ask guests or to do a solo episode by myself, I was forced to be a deeper thinker than I had ever been before. So that's what really started it. And then Alan, the co-host and the CEO of the company, he was my mentor. So I would say, Alan, what book should I read? And he'd say, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Compound Effect. He'd give me a list of books. You got to read these: Money Master the Game, Unleash the Giant Within, all these books. So I started reading books. That's really what started to help me. But a lot of it was behind the scenes conversations that I was having with Alan, really, because I would get a new awareness based on a conversation, and then I would reflect on that. Say like, okay, what does this mean for everything else that's ever happened in my life? And then what does this mean moving forward for everything in my life? So a lot of it was just deep thoughts and deep talks that really, really helped me. Now, caveat of that is Alan is a very, very, very intelligent individual who understands the layers of the human condition. So he was able to guide me in ways that maybe other people wouldn't. But honestly, it was the podcast. It was Alan and the podcast that really, really made me become more self-aware. And then I became obsessed with it. And then it was, if I can, in real time, realize that I am getting insecure because of a conversation we're having, and understand why I'm getting insecure, I can stop myself from getting insecure. Then I don't have to villainize somebody who's more confident than me. I can control everything, kind of, in a way. And that was empowering for me. So that's when I really leaned into it.
And do you mean that you were taking responsibility and ownership for the things that happen inside of you?
Yes. Yes.
Processes, let's say, because
yes,
like detached from the content side, you took ownership of the fact that something was happening.
I took positive ownership, and I took responsibility too.
Yeah.
Of just because this person's confident does not mean they're arrogant. Maybe I'm just being insecure in this moment. So I think it helped me see a more accurate version of the truth.
Yeah.
right? I wasn't going by accident anymore. I could actually understand, no, they're not arrogant. You're just super insecure when they talk about money because you don't know how to make the money or whatever it is. Yeah.
It's just like, sometimes I have my creative mind takes over. So the thing that pops into my mind is when you are with the dentist, and you are just laying there and you can see your own teeth, but then he has this mirror and he has showed you a different perspective of the same thing. That literally isn't that's what you were talking about. Like it's like an internal mirror that you twist and turn. And it's basically it's also behind you. It's like all these figures like show different perspectives of one thing. So so can you say that to be able to start your self-improvement, you need to be curious to different parts of the truth about one thing?
Yeah.
For example?
Yeah. I think if you really want to start the journey, you have to want to learn about you. The positive, the negative, the pleasure, and the pain. You have to understand who you actually are. One of the things that really was a breakthrough for me was in the beginning when my girlfriend left, I'm sure I said, she's crazy, blah, blah, blah. Then it got to the point where I was like, okay, every relationship I've had has failed up until this point. I'm at least 50% of those mistakes, right? It's not, is it every woman I've ever dated is just like, there's something wrong with them? No, I don't think that's it. But I was able to look in the mirror and say, what is it about you, Kev, that has created so many of these things? And that's scary and it's painful and you can get a lot of awareness at once. But I really believe that's the only way for you to live an aligned, fulfilled, successful life. You have to know yourself, because when you know yourself, everything else starts to make more sense.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that really helped me is also to not only to know myself and the things that happen, but also why.
Yeah.
Why, like connecting the dots for yourself to understand with your brain and also to understand with your heart in one point. Because I think that is like you start your journey always from the brain, right? We want to understand as a human.
Yeah.
In our minds, so we can make a little bit sense out of the things that happen. And then we want to understand and to really understand in our hearts and to be okay with it, to find acceptance and to give yourself the permission also to let things go and to move forward.
I think the understanding at the heart level is you allowing it to resolve. It's kind of like, oh, okay, that's what all that means. I don't have to hang on to that from a place of anger or heartbreak or whatever. Like, oh, because I did this, this is what ended up happening. Now this is the truth. That's the truest version of what I can see.
Exactly.
Now I can let it go.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because you sometimes you can look at the situation now and 2 years from now, for example, and 2 years from now, you can see a whole different truth because you evolved as a person. So it's the truth comes within the years, right? As well, I think, and in time and with the wisdom and the insights and the growth that you go through. Yeah.
And then even deeper, another layer to that is that's why some people regret past actions, because you're looking at a old layer of awareness based on a new layer of awareness and saying, oh, that never should have happened. Sometimes that has to happen for you to get the new layer of awareness where you can look back and see it clearly. And that's a whole nother depth of deep diving that we could do. But that's another part. Or I think you regret things, going back to I think it was our original touch point of this part, when you are out of alignment. So when you're out of your core beliefs, your core aspirations, or your core values, then you leave a situation and say, oh, I feel dirty. Like, why? Oh, I wasn't in alignment with my core goals, my core values, really. So I think it's either a new level of awareness looking back on a past level of lower awareness, or outside of alignment in one of those three, probably.
Yeah. Maybe I can give one example that I experienced myself that was so life-changing for me. So I was very young when my sister was born, and now I understand, like, I didn't develop my identity, but I was already at a young age developing identities for others, of course. And I felt so out of alignment for so many years. I was very successful, won awards and everything. And it's like the typical story. And my sister passed away, and 15 months after, I took in a foster girl. She was a teenage girl back then. And like from one day to another, she was already a little bit longer in my life. So I was already like, yeah, someone for a few years that she went through too. Sorry. And well, the circumstances were so desperately needed. She just needed a place, and I could literally not think of any other place than in my house. But well, I was 35, I think, back then. No, 32, 33. I'm 37 now. Having this teenager in my life, and with all the traumas and everything that was happening with her, and then I was looking at her, and I was giving her all the professional help that she needed to go through her traumas, to work through them, and blah, blah, blah. And at one point I was looking at her and I was like, fuck, I was so young. Because I could see myself in her age going through all these things. And I was so angry with myself all the time for making wrong decisions, like ending up in a very unhealthy relationship when I was very young and staying in there, and like all these decisions. And I was so angry with myself. And then like literally one moment I was looking at her and I realized like, no, but I was too young. I was not being guided the way I'm doing with her now. And so all of a sudden, like my opinion about myself and the mistakes that I made changed. And that's what you're trying to say, I think, as well. It's like, because this mirror, and she was like an external mirror, of course, but that's what self-improvement can do, right?
Yeah. And that's why it can be painful, because I've had a lot of people that I've worked with. One of the through lines and one of the pain points of working with women is I've heard so many horror stories of them being taken advantage of, physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually abused. And I cannot stand that. That's one of the reasons we do what we do. But one of the realizations that people have is that was actually outside of my control. I was not aware enough to know that was actually happening. But when you look back, you beat yourself up, and that lowers your self-worth because you think you deserved it, or it was your fault. And that becomes this pattern. It's that pattern that happens. And you looking back can be very, very, very triggering because you have a new level of awareness that you didn't have back then. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And a lot of things that what you just said, I always, she's living with me again, by the way. So I always tell her, like, a lot of noise often comes from other people, because it doesn't, if you are happy with who you are, you don't make noise. Like, as in, like, you don't create the chaos. A lot of times that chaos is externally created. And that's also for the listeners right now, that if you experience chaos right now, and if you feel like you cannot really express yourself the way you want, then it's a good thing to start looking inside, and also and then ask yourself the question, like, what outside of me is not serving me anymore? I mean, but that's an inside question, instead of like when you're putting the blame on other people, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
it's so hard. It's so hard, especially that one. One of the biggest things that I have seen is the people around people. That's exactly. I can tell you with certainty, if I didn't, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but if I didn't focus on improving the quality of people around me, I never would have gotten to where I am today. Not a chance. Not a chance. One of my favorite questions, I love questions, are the people in your life the best from your past or the best for your future? Just because you went to high school together, you used to work out together, you used to date, you used to party, doesn't mean that's what's best for your future. Now, again, that is a very challenging, very hyper-conscious question to ask yourself. But oftentimes the most challenging questions are also the most rewarding ones when you answer them honestly and truthfully.
Yeah, it might take a few years though.
Yeah. So, it's not going to happen overnight.
So don't expect like immediate results. It's not like a quick fix. I mean, it's not, but it's the best fix. So that's very interesting. And so So when you were doing this, when you were 25 and you realized like, okay, this is not what I want anymore, but I don't know what I want instead, but I do know that I don't want to stay here, right? That's the situation where you are in.
Yeah.
So at one point it got so bad that you wanted to take your own life.
Yeah. I had made all this money, decided I didn't want to do this job anymore, started a podcast that I love doing, but I didn't know how to leave my job. I didn't think I could be a successful podcaster. It didn't seem realistic for me. That's a very rare thing to do. So I started calling out of work. I started leaving the job site early. I would show up late, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And I was staying up for days on end. I wasn't podcasting as much as I wanted to. And I was in New Jersey, which was like 6 hours from where I lived. Okay. My alarm clock went off at 5:15 in the morning. I sat up, I stood to the edge of the bed, lacing up my work boots. I'd done this 1,000 times. But that morning, something was different. It was like there was 10 televisions on in my head, and every single one was on a different station. And one saying, you're stuck here forever. I know you want to leave, but you're never going to make this kind of money again. If you do leave, what will your friends think? If you do leave, what will your family think? And this was the loudest one. If you do leave, do you think you're going to be a successful professional podcaster? Like, how the hell is that going to happen? And in that, yeah, who do you think you are? Right? That doesn't happen for people like you, quote unquote, people like you. I'm not the type of person. Talk about identity. And in that moment, I felt like if I was to take my life, I would take my problems with me. Now, the reason I am so big on community is because I texted Alan. I felt safe enough to text somebody and say, hey, I'm really struggling. I'm really dealing with this. What do I do? Or even if it's just a shoulder to lean on. And I texted Alan and I explained the situation. And he, in his wisdom, he's very smart, said, Kev, so much has changed for you over the last couple of years in terms of your awareness, but your environments haven't. I think you need to change your environment. Alan gave me one big thing there. And I think you used this word earlier, Mirte, permission.
Yeah.
He gave me permission to make a different decision. And I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later and being a very broke entrepreneur for a long time. Very broke. I did not go from there to where we are. I couldn't pay the bills. I was $35,000 in debt. I couldn't afford presents, pay rent. But I do know that I was more fulfilled being broke in alignment with being wealthy outside of alignment. I do know that to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because money only fills your pockets and not your heart, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I was more. I'm writing things down now.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
I was more fulfilled when I was broke. Yeah. Yeah, that it's. I recognize a lot, and I think that this part where we're talking about this one word, the permission. It's. I think it has been my lifesaver as well, because the permission to work on yourself, the permission to make decisions that benefit you, the permission to say yes to yourself without saying no to another. There is so much in there, the permission, and we hold ourselves back from that. And it's so funny that we give away that ownership. We give away that thing to another person, but it's so toxic for us.
It is. Alan said this. This is Alan's quote. I can't take credit for it, but what if what's best for you is what's best for the world? What if you saying, you know what? I don't want to go out tonight. I'm going to stay in and fill my cup. What if you could do that without guilt? How different would your life be? And again, that's a challenge, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it has to come from the place of I'm going to give myself permission to potentially let down other people, to not let down myself again. That's such an important phase to go through.
Exactly. And that's where it begins. I mean, that's the first permission you have to give yourself, or trust someone enough to give you that permission for you. I mean, like the way Ellen did for you. Sometimes you just need to have that little last push, that mirror that moves you forward, right?
Yeah.
And so what happened after you gave yourself permission, or he gave you permission to do that?
I remember the day I left my job. It was basically like one weight was taken off my shoulder, a bigger, different weight was put on my shoulder. So it was very much, overnight, I kind of became an entrepreneur. That's what happened was I started posting on social media more, and I started trying to learn how to become a better speaker, and I started studying business and entrepreneurship and sales. Really, it was, okay, now you're in the pool of entrepreneurship. It's time to learn how to swim. And that really was what it was. Alan and I would meet up. We weren't very busy back then because there wasn't a lot going on. And we would meet up at my house and we would record a podcast episode. And then we would just have like deep talks for hours. Like that's what we did. We were just philosophizing about the world and ego and the human condition. And that really was where it started for me. It was really that. It was work on your own self-improvement. And I know this sounds cliche and it's also circumstantial. Not everybody can do it this way, but it was also work on your character, Kev. If you want to like make it and you don't want to get found out and you want to be confident in everything that you're doing, you and Alan have to work on your characters, because you have to be the best men you can be. If you want to have the best business, if you want to have the best podcast, you have to be the best men. That is what comes first. And that's what we did for the first year and a half or 2 years. We had brutal conversations about, hey, we don't talk like that. We do not participate in these actions. That's not who we are. That's not who we aspire to be. It's not what we want to be known for. The challenging time, internal shame of like, oh, I said a certain thing I don't ever want to say again. Okay, let me get rid of that. That's not who I am anymore. So it was character. In the beginning, we literally just said, Alan and I had this funny competition that I know that I can be man than you. I have a bigger heart. I know I can be a better man. Whatever that means, I don't know. But that was our competition. It wasn't about who could make the most money or have the most clients. It was about who could be the better man. And it really still is. We're still playing that game, but better.
So what really triggers me positively is the intention of the things that the intention that you put in. So I've been giving this example to, I think it was someone who works at Mercedes. We were talking about sustainability and stuff, and they had to do something as a reaction to, so they had to use sustainability as a reaction to something that they did wrong or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember saying like, but it's already the wrong intention, because you are doing something because you want to fix something, or like you want to maybe like put something away or out of the spotlight, instead of really doing it from your heart without any significant reason to do it other than I want it. And I think that's very powerful. What you're saying is like our intention from the beginning was to be a better man, not to make money or to have a big business, or it's like literally a consequence of that intention, right? Yeah.
I understand that I'm not going to have an extraordinary marriage unless I'm an extraordinary man. And me thinking that I can is just it's not empowering. Thinking that I can have a business that changes the world and not become the type of person who is capable of keeping up with that, I'm going to be in for a life of sadness if that's what happens. That was the belief that we had, was the only way this business is going to win holistically in the ways we want it to win is if we become the type of humans, the type of men that are capable of leading. That's it.
So
that's the only way.
What you did is you reframed your limiting belief from 5 years ago, like, who am I to do that, into how can I become the person who does it?
Let's believe so much in who you are as a human that nobody can question it. That, like, really, really earn it. Earn it. Earn it through your action. Earn it through your knowledge. Earn it through your example. Earn it through your character. Because worst case scenario, somebody reaches out and says, who are you to do what you're doing? At least I go to bed that night knowing that I deserve what I have because I've worked so hard for it. I've worked so hard for this. And I've had people question me. I've had somebody reached out to me a couple of years ago and said, I don't mean this with any hate, but who are you? Like, why do you get to coach people in podcasts on self-improvement? And it was very kind. It was a very kind message. And I said, wow, that's kind of my biggest fear, that somebody would call me out and say, why do you get to do this? And you know what I did? I went through and I said, well, at this point, I've done, 300 podcast episodes. I've coached dozens of people. I have mentors that are some of the best in the world. I've learned every single day for the last 2 years. I would say I'm in the position where I can probably help a large percentage of people just based on my experience. And that was empowering for me to say that because I had never said that out loud before. That was like really empowering.
Yeah. And it really ties into the things that we said, like in our conversation before, is like the limiting belief with the consistency and the intention to move forward, even though it's only 1% a day, to create the confidence in the end to be able to send a message like this. It's all connected.
It is. Right? It starts with you making and keeping promises to yourself of, I'm going to do that thing today. And I'm just in a very unique place because I have so many podcast episodes, but it took me 150 to actually feel confident. Like imagine doing 149 podcast episodes and not feeling confident before any of them. And then being at 150 and saying, oh, you know what? It seems like something kind of started to shift here. I actually think I can do this. And here we are 1,000 episodes later, but I never would have thought I was confident if I stopped at episode 149 because I wasn't all the way confident. I was more confident, but I still didn't have real confidence yet. It's the reps. You got to do the reps.
Yeah. So what kept you going? Like, because sometimes as a game changer, and I'm saying this from a personal experience, and I see it with my clients as well, we are being challenged to really stand behind the vision that we have, even though it's difficult. So can you put into words what was driving you to move forward, even though you were not comfortable?
The mission, the reason we do this, the mission that I am very blessed and privileged that I get to jump in front of a microphone every day and I can wear pajamas from the waist down. I'm very privileged. Not everybody has that opportunity. I was in love with what I was doing. I was in love with podcasting. I was in love with coaching. I was in love with interviewing people. I just wanted to keep going. That was really what it was, is I jumped in a pool and I wanted to learn how to swim. I didn't want somebody to pull me out of the pool, to the point where I remember I remember saying this to myself, like every month, I just need to make enough money to get to next month. I just need to make enough money to get to next month. I'm so afraid that one day I'm going to wake up and someone's going to take this from me, that I'm going to have to go get a job. I don't want to do that. Like what we're doing is important. It's important work that I actually think we can do. That was really what it was. This is another quote, I guess. A lot of people start things and they have the P's in the wrong order. They start something for profit and they try to convince themselves that they're passionate about it. I didn't start this for profit. No. I had no idea how we were going to make $1. I started this because I wanted to really help people. That's why I never quit, because I just wanted to do this. If I could turn this into my living, I would be the happiest person ever. That's what I said in the beginning. And here we are. Now I get to do it. So yeah, it really was that. I felt blessed to have the opportunity to do this. And I know a lot of other people don't get the opportunity to do this.
Well, I created the opportunity.
Fair. Yeah,
don't underestimate your own efforts. Fair. I mean, in the end, it is the ones that are being challenged so much to stay determined in the things that you believe in and that you want to add value to. It's also that we underestimate sometimes our own efforts in that, and looking back, and we think it's normal. We think it's normal to work 60, 70 hours a week, to record 150 podcasts without maybe no one listening, or, but it's not normal.
Yeah.
And I think it's, well, this is my way of giving you a compliment. This is the Dutch way. Let's say, it's amazing what you did. And it's amazing that indeed we are now sitting here talking about important topics like this to hopefully inspire and empower many people that also have something deep inside of them that wants to come out. And maybe you don't know how yet, but if you do feel that there is something, then just take the first step. Give yourself permission to investigate. Yeah, that's really, really powerful.
I appreciate the compliment so very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. I feel like we are in this energetic bubble, and I'm aware of the fact that in 4 minutes you have another interview.
I'm sad. It went by, like you said, it went by so fast.
Yeah, it did. So is there any last takeaway that you want to close this amazing episode with?
I would say one of my favorite quotes is, your reality becomes the parts of your imagination that you hold on to and pour into the longest. That really is the theme of this. I started this with one podcast episode, and I said, imagine if you could do that forever. Like, if I could do that for a living, oh my goodness, that would be awesome. And I hung on to that thought, and I hung on to that intention, and I poured into it a little bit every day. And now you're seeing that plant start to grow, but it's only because I poured into it behind the scenes when nobody was watching, and it was just a little seedling, just kept going. That can be your reality too, in your own unique version of that.
Yeah. And give yourself time for that. Like,
yes,
be realistic. It might take like 2-3 years.
Yeah. It most likely will.
Yeah.
It most likely will.
And then you have another devil, because you have another level. It's another devil, right?
Right. Yeah.
So can I ask you one last question?
Sure.
What is your next level?
I get asked this so much, and I don't have a good answer. It's really just doing what we're doing now, but better and more exponential. It's so hard, right? At this time last year, I wasn't capable of doing what I am now. So I did 245 interviews in the last 80 days. 245 podcast episodes. I did more in 3 months, 2.5 months than some people do in their entire career. I wasn't capable of doing that 5 years ago.
No.
In 5 years, I might be able to do 1,000 in a couple months. I don't know. So it's more impact, more mastery, and more profitability, exponential. That's really the best answer I can give.
Yeah. And increase your capabilities, right?
Yes.
In a holistic way. And I think, well, then that's the circle is round again. I don't know if you say that in English as well, because that's self-improvement is all about.
Yeah.
It's like, keep getting better and stay motivated to evolve.
Every day a little bit.
Exactly. Okay, well, I'm going to, I have to let you go. Please stay with me for 1 minute after I stop the recording.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Kevin. And I'm positive that we inspired a lot of people with this episode. Thank you.
My pleasure, genuinely.